Hey guys, and before we kick on with this video, let's face it, if you subscribe to this channel for a while, this video is going to be a real problem for me. Why? Because we're discussing routers, not routers, routers. And I know there's a body of people that subscribe to this channel who are going to go into the comments after this video or even right now and absolutely lose it, because I'm going to keep calling this device a router. That is what I call it. That is what a large percentage of the world call it. We don't call it routers, we call them routers, but you can call them routers. It's totally fine. We can all be different, the world we live in. But do me a favor, watch this video through to the end. Try not to absolutely lose it on the fact that I'm calling this device a router, not a router, all the way through. And if you must bang the dislike button, please dislike it because you don't like the video, not because some limey on the video said router, not router. Roll the intro. Hello and welcome back, and today we are going to discuss the QNAP QMiro router series. We're talking about two devices in their new series of router. It's a mesh router system with a difference. It is the QMiroPlus-201, the 201 being the satellite and the Plus-201 being the main body hub system. And it arrives with storage base 2 times 2.5 inch media bays inside. It runs a parallel 2 processor system inside with 2 lots of memory as well, and this system here takes advantage of both QNAP's Q router graphical user interface software and services, as well as running parallel QTS 4.5. It is a combined NAS and router system, but it is also a mesh router system that allows you to bolt on mesh nodes throughout your home or business environment. Now, this is the second time on this channel, barely, that I've talked about a router system that has both personal cloud elements and has router elements as well. Now, it may not be live yet, but I've done a full review of this in the past. This is the Amber Pro, and it is a combined personal cloud and router system. And again, that is very much a new and user-friendly product on the market, and of course we'll be comparing it against this very shortly. But right now, this is the best thing I've ever seen in this field. Yes, it's not a perfect mesh router system. I think there are a few things that could do with a revisit, such as the lack of Wi-Fi 6, something that this did very, very well. This is the QHora system. This is a 10 GBE and Wi-Fi 6 enabled router, but this sadly is not Wi-Fi 6. This is a Wi-Fi 5 system, but it is a mesh AC2200 router system. So I just wanted to skip past anyone that's watching this right now and going, woohoo, Wi-Fi 6. I'm afraid not. This is Wi-Fi 5, so you're talking ACN, that sort of thing. But this system, on the other hand, is one of the few routers in the world that takes advantage of both mesh and personal cloud built-in systems there. And in today's video, we are doing the hardware review. This is too broad a subject to put into a combined hardware and software video without having to skip stuff over. So this is a 2-part review. In this review, we're going to look at the hardware. We're going to look at, take it apart a little bit, what we get inside the boxes, a closer look. And in the next part of the review, with the conclusion, we're going to go into the software side, both the QTS side and the Q router side. And we have another video coming up, hopefully, where we've got a few nodes and we're going to test the performance, the bandwidth, and ultimately the coverage while we move through a mesh system. So let's get straight into it. Both of these systems are actually quite similar. They've got a very similar Qualcomm router processor inside. I'm looking at my notes very quickly. The IP-Q4019, which is a quad-core networking processor there, with the QMiro satellite model, the little tiny node models, arriving with half a gig of DDR4 memory, and this system arriving with a gig of DDR3 memory. And on top of that, this system also has, for the NAS side, an Intel Celeron processor, the J4125, something we've seen in the D series and other multimedia NASs as well. It's embedded graphics. It's a quad-core 2.0 gigahertz processor that can be burst up to 2.7 with, I think, almost 3,000 score on CPU benchmark. On top of that, it also arrives with 4 gig of DDR4 memory as well. So that's quite an aggressive little SMB NAS built inside this system. And as mentioned, it also has 2.5 inch SATA bays inside. It doesn't arrive pre-populated. which means you're only going to be able to take advantage of the router side of things, but it does allow you to take advantage, once you install that storage media of hard drive or SSD, QTS, and all of that myriad of applications that we'll talk about a little bit more later in the video. So let's go with the main model first. Let's go straight into the QMiroPlus. You don't need to own this to take advantage of this, but it is advisable that you kind of get them as a package. And the main big model here arrives for about $450, I think maybe $500, depending on where you are. And if we have a look inside what we get for our money, let's open that up. Leave that box there on the table. Got a bit of foam there, pretty standard packaging there. We've got an external power brick there. This takes advantage of a 60-watt external PSU, this model, because it needs the additional power for that storage media. Also inside, we have our UK external mains lead, but of course, wherever you are in the world, you will get yours. We have our quick start installation guide, telling you how to set the device up for the first time, install the applications and such. There are mobile applications that you can utilize with this device, not only a dedicated Q router mobile application, but the majority of QNAP's own apps for mobile, iOS and Android work with this, along with the desktop client applications with support on this of hybrid backup sync, or a lot of the file management services, surveillance services. I'm really looking forward in the software review to see just how far QTS runs on this, because if this has similar architecture to the likes of the 53D, the 253D for that matter, it means that this device could be used for virtualization for Plex Media Server, and obviously there is existing support of photo recognition with QMAGI. So let's get that out of there. We also have a Cat 5e cable there. This device also has 2.5 GBE on board as well. You don't really need that anymore. So let's have a little look inside. It's actually really petite. And again, I will save this for the full comparison down the line. But if we look at the size of this, and then we look at the size of this, we can see quite a distinction there between these two devices. And again, the reason I will be comparing these two devices in a later video is they're kind of unique in the industry for what they're bringing, a combined router and storage system. If we have a look at it there, we can see the front of it, and I believe that front panel comes off. Have we got a locking mechanism? Let's have a little look. Yep, it hinges off there at the front. And again, not ventilated, that front panel. I'm not sure how I feel about the colour scheme. I know they advertise it quite a lot, and quite a lot of people like what I would call the baby blue colour, but I'm not overly bowled over by the colour. We've got WPS buttons and ventilation there at the front, and we've got those 2.5 inch bays there at the front. And again, we can remove those there. And again, what I quite like already on these trays is not only, don't get me wrong, 2.5 inch media means you are going to hit a limitation when it comes to storage, whether you're using hard drives or SSD, but those are definitely 15mm deep trays there. That means you can get some big 2.5 inch drives in there. For those that aren't aware, 2.5 inch SATA media, particularly hard drives, less so about SSDs, you generally can't get mobile drives bigger than 2 TB unless you go for drives known as 15mm height drives. This will allow it, so you can get drives up to 5 TB installed inside there, which is pretty impressive. If we remove the second tray, we can have a look inside. And again, nice wire-free assembly in there. You can just make out the SATA ports there at the back, so combined SATA connector, data connector and power. Information there at the top about the default login, which obviously we're going to need later on. Rubberized feet, not a vast amount of ventilation. I'm curious about the cooling on this system. Got a little bit of vent there, and obviously that ventilation panel there at the base front. And again, I'm thinking less about the router side, because let's be honest, a router doesn't generate that much power, even when it's highfalutin. But given this is a combined NAS and router system, I'd be slightly more concerned about ventilation. So I'm looking forward to kind of hearing that as much as seeing it when it's in operation. On the rear, we've got that rear-mounted fan there. And again, that RPM, but that fan can be automated. It can be set manually if you choose. But again, I wouldn't play around with that. We've got a couple of USB ports there. Should be highlighted, as you can see. There is no HDMI port on this, which is actually a real shame. Given it's got that CPU, which has got embedded graphics, you had the potential for a KVM setup there and taking advantage of direct visual output. But The fact that it's got those USB ports still means that you can take advantage, if QTF 4.5, as we'll see in the software review, can run to the same extent of a desktop. Obviously external storage, obviously the expansion devices from QNAP to get even more storage, network and internet accessible on this mesh router combined cloud system. And on top of that, you've got network adapter upgrades. You've got USB cameras that you can connect to this for the surveillance software. But again, treat these bits with a pinch of salt until we've done the full software review. And on the base there, we can see 5 Ethernet ports. And again, as mentioned, this port here, the WAN, Wide Area Network, this port here is 2.5 GBE, and these ones here are all 1 GBE. So again, this is a fairly competent router in terms of network connectivity, and we are still dealing with something that is a mesh router system combined NAS. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what that hardware brings to the table. Now, let's take a slight sidestep there and move on to the satellite point, because you're going to need this. Make sure you can actually see it. This is the satellite point. So this is where you dot these around your home or business environment. So you can have that great mesh system so that when you are walking around with your mobile phone, sort of dotted around, moving between different room to room with all thick walls, rather than having maybe wireless access points or power line adapters, where your phone will still be reluctant to disconnect from the primary route that you just moved away from, mesh router systems ultimately move your device around in a way, in that when you're walking along and moving between each mesh point, your router silently, without you knowing, still connects to this new mesh point. It's a very interesting thing, mesh, and the way it's evolved over the last few years has been really interesting. And it's a subject, as you followers of the channel have known, I've covered for a long time with Synology's own mesh router systems and other meshes coming more onto the scene. But this is the first time I've seen one this highly evolved and integrated with NAS to this high degree. So if we have a look inside, this is the mesh satellite or node. Inside here, we've got quick start installation guide. We have the external PSU here. This is just a 24 watt PSU. There's no storage capabilities inside this, but obviously this will allow you to communicate with the storage inside there. We have a look, we'll lift the device out. Obviously there's an Ethernet cable as well. Busy desk today, isn't it? And then we've got here, this is our satellite node. It's a little bigger than I thought it would be. I mean, I've got quite large hands, but that is quite large there. And again, lots of ventilation, way more ventilation on this satellite point. And that's largely because if I had to take a pinch guess, this is not going to have an active cooling system. There's going to be no internal fan here, and it's going to be heavily reliant on passive airflow running over those heat sinks. So this is going to run silent. This little bit of fan noise in the ambient there. So no removable front panel. And if we look at the rear, we have an additional USB port there. So again, this is a system that's only really, to my mind, going to run router OS. How it utilizes that USB port, we're obviously going to check out the software review, but the fact that it has USB ports on there presumably means external storage, and particularly USB 3.2 Gen 1, so 5 gigabit USB storage is going to be network and internet accessible. There's also a dedicated LAN and dedicated WAN, both of which are 1 GBE in architecture. So that is the system there so far. Let's talk a little bit about the internals, because I'm reluctant to take this apart in the hardware unboxing, although obviously on NAS Compared we will go into a little bit more take apart detail. Now, I mentioned earlier on that these are Wi-Fi 5 and AC2200. Now, the AC2200 is comprised of 3 individual bands internally. You've got one 2.4 gigahertz band, which will put out 400 megabits. So again, that's about 40 megabytes. Again, it's not strict conversions there. And there are 2 5 gigahertz networks. Now, if you utilize these in non-mesh capacity, that is a lot of coverage there, with each of those 5 gigahertz bands giving you around 860 megabits, so 86 megabytes throughput there. But of course, the reason, one of the most appealing reasons that this has 2 5 gigahertz channels is thanks to that mesh. It allows a dedicated 5 gigahertz frequency, or dedicated or as much as it needs, to communicate between these mesh points. And when you've got multiple dotted around, it allows you to have a broader higher coverage network and also better performance within that network, and therefore the intended internet connection point here. And remember, if you are running a greater than gigabit internet connection in your home, and lots of internet service providers now are surpassing the gigabit internet, this, thanks to its 2.5 GBE connection for the WAN, means that the rest of the system and the wider mesh network are going to be able to take advantage of it. Now, inside, both of these have got 4 antennas inside, and those 4 antennas, again, just broaden the network. They're not external antennae or antennas, whichever one you want to refer to it as, plural, but they're all built into the edges of the chassis. And again, we have discussed documents where we saw the original blueprints of this device over on NAS Compares, which you can check out all the way through. And power consumption is understandably very, very low on these systems. Because these ultimately, I would say they're primarily routed. I think the NAS side of this is maybe a little bit held back. But I am genuinely looking forward to seeing how this behaves as a NAS, and definitely as a NAS combined router. In terms of QRouter software, it's pretty much got everything that a modern fully featured router system is not. We've used it before in the QHora in a previous video, and it has had numerous updates since then. So again, there's huge support of QWAN for business users that have got multi-site deployment, and definitely ones that are running priority services like SIP and voice over IP stuff within their business. So they need to assign kind of priorities and make sure the system can change on the fly. That's pretty much what SD-WAN lives at its best for in more recent years of networking, and that's something that QWAN, their own take on SD-WAN, really brings to the forefront. You've got client control of connected devices where they can be assigned identities. You've got network control, so again you are talking quality of service, priority of service, loop detection, link aggregation, that sort of thing. And link aggregation and some of the bonding that we've seen on their network software is kind of visible here, and again that leans into the combined NAS and router side of things, and dare I say, a little bit of switch stuff there. And again, like I say, this isn't the complete review. Wait until you've seen the software review, but given what they're promising this can do, and given the hardware on offer, I'm still pretty impressed by it. On top of that, you've got standard SSID control from both the individual units and as a wider area network to create multiple SSIDs, not just guests, but multiple SSIDs. So you can have subnetworks for guests, networks under different control and access privileges within a home or business environment, which is quite good to assign that level of control and access to your users, not just on the local area network with NASs, but obviously when you are connecting to the wider internet as well. You've got NAT settings there for control and making sure that with port forwarding rules be completely customizable on this side, although please be careful when you play with those things. And then of course you've got the likes of parental control built in, which I think a number of people over the years, myself included, took for granted that the majority of premium routers have by default. They don't have parental controls by default, and lots of devices lock parental control behind subscription fees, otherwise saying to you, yeah, you can block a website, but you have to put every bad internet address in the internet and then we'll let you block it. That's no good. So it's good that the parental control is built in with the cost of the price of this device at no additional fee. And there is, it has to be said, a different level of control with QRouter as we've seen from Synology's own Router OS, and we will of course be comparing this mesh system against the current generation of Wi-Fi 5 Synology routers. We've already compared their software before, but that was around about 6 or 7, maybe even 8 months ago. So it'll be interesting to see as each brand have updated their firmware how they compare overall. And again, as much as I would like to comment on the NAS side of this software and what QTS brings to the table, I suspect that the software will cover pretty much everything. I think the full range, QTS range of applications are going to be possible on this. But without having tested it yet, I'm going to resist the urge to talk about this right now, and I recommend that hopefully in the description or after this video, good old YouTube will recommend the software review. If not, there will of course be a link in the description, and of course visit the article at NAS Compares, where we've done a full review of this device. We're already, it will have gone through a lot of the hardware and software specifications, so do check that out. But ultimately, from what I'm seeing here, I'm quite pleased with this. I would argue perhaps right now that the price tag this arrives with may seem a tad intimidating. Not so much the node, and I think the lack of Wi-Fi 6 is a bit short-sighted, particularly as I say, they have a Wi-Fi 6 router that came out before this. They clearly understand that Wi-Fi 6 is popular, and if not growing in popularity, the necessity. But aside from that Wi-Fi 6 concern, I think the price tag on this is going to be quite hard for some to stomach. Yes, in a way, as mentioned, the hardware architecture in this compares very, very well against the likes of the TS253D, which I believe knocks around for about $300 to $350 for that 2-bay. So this arriving at $450 to $500 to be a combined mesh router system and storage system, you can kind of do the justification for that price. But I think for users that aren't going to exclusively take advantage of that, I think they may find that price tag a little bit intimidating, but we'll have to wait and see. But otherwise, in terms of hardware, I'm quite impressed with what I see here. Let's move on to the software and see if the proof is in the pudding. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, chuck me a like. If you want to learn more, click subscribe. And of course, if you are looking for free data storage advice, you can visit the free advice section at NAS Compares in the link in the description. Genuinely free, genuinely unbiased, and although it might take an extra day or so for the 2 human beings, myself and Eddie the web guy, that answer your questions about networking, storage, whatever, we will answer every single email with completely free impartial advice. And the last thing I will add is, if you are the person that goes into the comments and says it's pronounced router, we are not friends. I will see you in the next video.